overnight, the Iranians launched more ballistic missiles into Israel around 7 a.m. local time. The air raid sirens started to sound across this city and others. We were in the shelter and could hear the explosions overhead as some of those missiles were intercepted. Others slammed into residential areas and a hospital. Here's what it looked like when we arrived at that medical center. Black smoke billows from the Soroka Hospital in southern Israel. An Iranian missile hit the campus this morning just after 7 a.m., sending shockwaves through the halls. Suddenly, we heard the explosion, Juma Abu Kush says. We knew it's very close to us. Debris fell from the ceiling. Throughout the day, patients were evacuated to nearby hospitals as others were discharged if their condition warranted. First responders surveyed the damage as political leaders came by to voice their opposition to the bombing.
The Dollar regime targeted this morning is a hospital with helpless, sick people. This is an extreme war crime, and they will bear the consequences.
What's also important to note is that this is a place that there are both Israelis and Palestinians coming for care. There are Bedouins. When you walk around the compound of this hospital, there are still people in other areas. There are men wearing kippahs and women wearing hijabs. And it's an example of how this part of Israel lives, how they live side by side, and how there is a future.
I've interviewed people, doctors throughout Israel at different hospitals. Everyone says the same thing. We take care of Arabs, we take care of Jews, we take care of Israelis, we take care of terrorists. In my own training at Bellevue, I took care of us people committing assaults, handcuffed on stretchers next to victims. That's the way doctors look at it. So it's beyond a disgrace to attack an undefended hospital.
Right now, the president is getting an intel briefing inside the White House, and he and his team are weighing their options on whether the United States should join Israel's attacks on Iran. One U.S. official has already told Fox the president has been asking questions to his aides about bunker-busting bombs. Exactly what are they? What do they do? Get into it. How many would you need? Iran says it would make the U.S. and its allies legitimate targets. But the White House says all options are on the table, and you know Trump means it. And according to the president, a ceasefire is not an option.
I don't want to get involved either, but I've been saying for 20 years, maybe longer, that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. I've been saying it for a long time. And I think they were a few weeks away from having one. And they had to sign a document. I think they wish they signed it now. It was a fair deal. And now it's a harder thing to sign, you know. It's a lot of water over the dam. But, you know, it's very, I say it very simply, Iran can't have a nuclear weapon.
You mentioned this, and I want to go deeper on the bunker buster bomb and how it works. Let's take a look now. First, it requires the use of a BT stealth bomber. It's the only aircraft currently programmed to carry that 30,000-pound payload that they are considering. Once in position, the B-2 drops 2 bombs, which are guided to target with GPS and internal navigation systems. The first bomb burrows into the ground and explodes, creating a hole up to 200 feet below the surface. The second bomb follows into that same hole, further burrowing into the ground and exploding well below the 200-foot mark. So they got to drill into that mountain where the Fordo nuclear site is. And I know you have a reaction to that and a little bit about policy.
Yeah, that would be a precision strike, which is what we're talking about. President Trump, his doctrine is peace through strength. An optimal word in that is strength, and identifying the moments to show American strength, as he did with Soleimani al-Baghdadi when he acted in Syria in 2017. To the isolationist crowd, my question would be, what makes your position materially different than the beachside foreign policy of Joe Biden? Sticking your head in the sand is no different than sitting in the sandy beaches of Delaware and saying don't. When we just said don't, which is what Biden said, what it got us was 2 global wars, one in Israel, one in Ukraine, both of which are raging. It got us the fall of a country to the Taliban. These are the facts. The facts are this. Iran is in the weakest position they have ever been in, not because of the United States, because of what Israel has done. This is a narrow window I don't believe we will ever have again. A narrow window to conduct a pinpoint strike. Not regime change. President Trump has said, I'm not taking out Khomeini. Right. Not ground forces. A precision strike to take out a nuclear weapon site that only the United States can do. That's the opportunity. That's the moment. And here's the alternative. Politico Playbook says, meanwhile in Europe. Okay, well, what's happening in Europe? Foreign ministers of Germany, France, and Britain plan to hold nuclear talks with Iranian counterparts. Who do I trust more? Germany and France to conduct foreign policy on behalf of the world to make sure nuclear proliferation doesn't happen? Or the man that gave us peace through strength, decimated ISIS, the man who doesn't want forever wars, the man who made sure no wars happened on his watch, and in 4 presidencies, Russia did not invade under Trump's watch. That is the man in charge. That is the commander-in-chief. It's not the past presidents, Republican and Democrats. It's the man who understands that doctrine.
According to new reporting, Trump has privately approved U.S. attack plans targeting Iran, but so far has held back on giving the final order. The pressure is building fast. Trump briefing with his national security team as we speak. Meanwhile, the U.S. just moved its newest supercarrier, the USS Gerald Ford, into the Mediterranean with a massive military buildup underway.
Listen, I think at some point something has to happen because you can't be half pregnant, right? They've already started this problem. They've already started this issue. You can't leave it. They have to finish it, whether it's the Israelis, whether it's anybody else. I think most of the world is in agreement that Iran should not have or could not have access to a nuclear bomb. And now that they've come this far, we've been talking about this for how long? I've been talking about for 50 years. It was 1979 when they got taken over. I was 19 years old, right? So for 50 years, we've been talking about this regime in Iran, and it cannot happen. So I know he's in a tough place, right? So Trump is in a tough spot right now, but I think something has to happen.
Meantime, overnight, the Israeli hospital that was directly hit from a major missile attack from Iran, this is below the belt, even in the means of war, Brian. And so, to me, it's an escalation. Iran obviously being very defiant here.
Yeah, they are. This happens a lot, I think, when people get backed into a corner, or a nation gets backed into a corner, or a maniacal dictator gets backed into a corner and knows that he has a losing hand. I hate to see this. These images are terrible. It doesn't surprise me with the Iranian regime. When have they ever shown an interest in human rights with their own people or anyone else's? Never. So this is what they do. What I like is President Trump continues to be so calculated and measured here. He is not being moved by anyone. Right. He's not. I don't think he's being moved by Netanyahu. He's not being moved by the Ayatollah. He's not being moved by his advisors. He's listening to them. He's putting option after option on the table and letting Iran see very clearly, we've got these assets. You don't want to know what they could do to you. But he's not being moved by anybody. And his focus, I think, has remained so crystal clear. And the right is even divided on this, which is interesting to me. But his focus has been so crystal clear. He is talking about the presenting threat of nuclear weaponry. And that's it. And that's what I want to see out of my leader. A strong hand and a very clear focus, and that's what we're getting out of the president.
What is important for Americans here at home? Because I think the president might also be considering, he campaigned on a promise of, mark my words on mark my success on how many wars we don't start, on how many forever wars we don't get into. And I think that is the issue right here, where in the specter of Iraq that we've talked about, how much of the last 25 years is hanging over all of our heads about boots in the ground, forever wars. Can you do a bunker buster? Is that one and done? What are the unintended consequences that you can't yet foresee from that? But the polling right now, Jackie, as you mentioned in your intro, is on his side. 73% of registered voters think Iran poses a real threat to the U.S. That's up 13 points, I should say, from 2019. 69% of Democrats agree with that. 82% of Republicans, but their voted is more split in terms of the reaction to it. So they were saying, do you want to launch missile strikes against Iran's nuclear programs? That's only half now are starting to approve that. And that's where things get dicey of like, well, then what do you do about Iran knowing that it is a fear, but then what is the action on that? The New York Times editorial had a really interesting piece today saying that you can do a bunker buster and then immediately follow up with a diplomatic solution, which is we will now relieve all of your economic sanctions because we've taken out your bunker buster, and then let's see if you can flourish.
Let me just make a point.
We'll see.
I think the calculation of what they're going to do.
There's an interesting emergence here with China. because you had over the weekend Tim Walz saying that the U.S. isn't a neutral peace broker, but that China would be the one to, administer peace somehow in this situation. And then you've got one of their ministers coming out today, China, saying that Israel should stop its strikes. So you clearly see where they stand.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to note here who is on whose side. You've got Iran backed up by China with alliances also with Russia. We're talking about communist regimes here essentially getting together. And I'm a little bit concerned about when this escalates, because it seems like it probably will, how those other players get involved in this.
Well, I think to your point, I mean, I said, I got to amend what I said. Oil is the most important variable here. If this escalates and China sides with Iran, with Russia, it emboldens them to go take over Taiwan, which is a complete game changer for the global economy, right? So I think don't mistake ourselves. They are watching very carefully how the president responds. And is he going to respond in strength like he has done? Is he going to do it in a way that leads to a diplomatic reconciliation? But here's the thing. You can offer diplomatic reconciliation immediately, drastic. But they might not want it
all along.
Exactly.
They've been offering it all along. To your point, if you blow up the nuclear site, just get it done. Now it's over. Now that part is gone. And yes, to your point, now we're going to come in and let's talk about diplomacy and let's talk about bringing you back online and getting rid of the sanctions and helping you flourish again, but not under those conditions.
Well, it's not quite over if you drop the bunker buster.
Well, it's over in the sense that you've now destroyed their nuclear capability.
It's over in the sense that there's rubble with enriched uranium laying under the rubble, and that's boots on the ground time. Now, I don't think that should be U.S. boots on the ground. I don't think the president said anything about that. But if you talk to people who know about this stuff, and we talked about this yesterday, somebody's boots
have to go
outside of Iran are going to be on the ground, and that is going to be that elongates the time to whatever deal you think you're going to get.
To complicate matters even further, we're talking about the notion of a regime change there as well, to take this, complete radical Islamist regime out altogether. That doesn't seem to be something the United States wants to get involved in. We haven't had a lot of success with that when we try to do it. But you've got the former Crown Prince of Iran on his social media calling for the people to rise up, saying Western powers are behind you. They will back you. Don't be scared. It is a very scary proposition to hit the streets and protest in that way, especially with such a militant regime. But they're just, I bring that up because there are so many variables here with respect of how this can go.
Right.
And Trump really has to look at the chessboard very carefully as he makes these decisions. I think he is doing that.
Doctrine. The president's foreign policy follows the doctrine of peace through strength. Proliferation. The international community is working to stop the proliferation of nuclear weapons. Decimated. The hurricane decimated the coastal towns, leaving thousands homeless. Regime. The oppressive regime was known for silencing dissent and controlling the media. Escalation. There's been an alarming escalation of violence in the region. Defiant. He gave a defiant speech, refusing to back down under pressure. One and done. They hoped the airstrike would be a one-and-done solution to the threat. Dicey. It's a dicey move to provoke another country during a military standoff. Embolden. The recent victory emboldens the rebels to push further. Drastic. The government announced drastic measures to curb inflation. Water over the dam. We had our disagreements in the past, but that's all water over the dam now.
If you enjoy this content, please consider subscribing to my channel to stay up to date with future videos. Thank you for watching.